Have you ever believed in something so deeply, so unquestionably, that the moment you discovered the truth, it felt as if the world shifted under your feet? It is strange how certain ideas become so universal that we stop questioning whether they were ever true to begin with. For decades, the world repeated one quiet assumption about the Philippines, whispering it with a tone somewhere between dismissal and condescension, as though it were simply accepted fact, as though it had been carved into stone. Filipinos are kind, they would say, but not refined enough for the highest circles. And people nodded, as if the entire world had already agreed, as if kindness alone was not enough to stand beside royalty. But what if that belief was never true? What if it was only a story told by those who never looked closely enough? The micro-shock came on an ordinary afternoon inside Windsor Castle, when Lady Aurelia Harrington, a senior advisor to the British royal household and a woman known for her composure, suddenly stopped speaking in the middle of a briefing. A moment of silence stretched over the room. Those present assumed she had forgotten her line, but she later admitted something entirely different. She said she felt humbled, even shaken, because of a single handwritten letter resting in her hands. A letter from a Filipino woman applying to be a nanny. A letter written with such sincerity and depth that Lady Aurelia could not continue reading aloud without her voice breaking. Why would a woman who had served 3 generations of royals pause for a simple application? Why would the palace, known for traditions older than entire nations, stop long enough to consider someone from a small Southeast Asian archipelago for a role typically reserved for elite British institutions? What if I told you the answer would eventually break centuries of royal protocol? And what if I also told you that behind that protocol shift lies one story, born thousands of miles away, shaped by hardships the British public would never imagine, and carried on the shoulders of a woman the world had overlooked? Her name, at least for our purposes here, is Maria Esperanza. She came from a province where the wind carried both the scent of the sea and the echoes of struggle, where illness was often left untreated, where dreams had to be stronger than hunger, and where hope sometimes felt like a borrowed thing. Maria was not born into power, prestige, or global recognition. She was born into simplicity, faith, and the kind of quiet resilience the world rarely celebrates until it desperately needs it. Before the British royal family ever knew her name, before Lady Aurelia ever held that letter, Maria had lived a life shaped by storms. Some literal, some emotional, all of them leaving marks that would one day become her strength. But in the beginning, there was only a girl who carried responsibilities too heavy for her age, and a belief that God must have a reason for giving her a heart that refused to give up on people. Little did she know that heart would one day open the doors of Buckingham Palace. Long before her letter reached Windsor, long before a royal advisor felt her composure slip, Maria Esperanza lived a life shaped by storms the world rarely sees. Poverty was not an abstract concept for her. It was the sound of rain leaking through a rusted roof, the sight of her mother choosing to eat less so the children could eat more, the quiet understanding that some illnesses never reach a doctor because the nearest clinic was a town too far and a cost too high. She remembered watching her father cough through nights when medicine was nothing more than a prayer whispered into the dark. And when he passed, far earlier than he should have, Maria felt the first crack in her childhood, one that never fully healed, but instead transformed into something steady, like a hidden pillar holding up her spirit. There were years when she thought life might soften its grip. School gave her brief fragments of hope, but life demanded she work before she could finish. She tried her luck in Manila, then in Cebu, joining the quiet army of Filipinos who wake before dawn and fall asleep long after exhaustion settles. She sent money home, even when she had almost nothing left to keep. She cared for children in houses where she was treated kindly, and in houses where she was treated like the help people ignored unless something went wrong. But no matter how difficult the day, she carried within her an unshaken belief that kindness was her calling. She nurtured every child she cared for as if they were her own. Yet even kindness has limits when the world refuses to open its doors. There was a time she tried leaving the country. First, she attempted the United States. Her papers stalled for years. Then Japan. A recruiter took her money and vanished. Europe came next. She trained, studied, sacrificed, only to be told that without the appropriate pedigree, she was unfit for elite childcare. Those words lingered with her, stinging in a way she pretended not to feel. She looked at herself in the mirror and wondered if the world was right, if she was reaching too high for someone born into too little. But somehow, despite heartbreak after heartbreak, Maria did not lose hope. Instead, she folded those disappointments into a quiet determination, believing that when life closes doors, God sometimes opens a window so small you can only see it if you are still looking up. And then came the faint, unexpected light, one that arrived not with fanfare, but with a single encounter. She met a Filipino doctor visiting her province for a charity mission. He spoke gently, but with conviction, telling her something she had not heard from anyone outside her family, that she was capable of more, that her compassion was not ordinary, that the world needed people like her. He encouraged her to apply for work abroad again, not in the places that had rejected her, but somewhere she had never even considered. The United Kingdom. It sounded absurd, impossible, almost laughable. But the doctor smiled, and in that moment she allowed herself to imagine what it would feel like to finally be seen for who she truly was. She did not know then that this small encouragement would one day place her inside the walls of a palace older than her nation, or that her life, once shaped by storms, was quietly steering her toward a destiny no one could have predicted. There is a moment in every journey when the road, once dismal and uncertain, suddenly reveals a bend you never saw coming. For Maria, that moment arrived the day she stepped off a bus in Manila, clutching the envelope containing her application for a UK childcare position. She had rewritten the letter by hand 3 times, steadying her script with each attempt, pouring pieces of her life into words she hoped would cross oceans. She did not know where this journey would lead, but for the first time in years, she felt something light flicker inside her, an ember of possibility. When she entered the recruitment office, she did not expect anyone to truly see her. The world had trained her to brace for disappointment. But instead of coldness or dismissive eyes, she found herself greeted by a Filipino staff member who offered her a cup of warm salabat and a smile that disarmed her defenses. There was something deeply human in that gesture, something she had rarely received in the countries she had pursued. And in that brief exchange, she felt a subtle shift, an understanding that hope, once distant, was beginning to draw nearer. Weeks passed without news, and Maria's hope wavered again. She tried to distract herself by volunteering at a small Cebu-based daycare run by a Catholic mission. It was there, surrounded by the laughter of children and the soft hymns playing from a nearby chapel, that her future found its first hint of clarity. One afternoon, a British representative from the agency arrived unexpectedly at the mission. He observed her quietly, watching as she soothed a child who had scraped his knee. She did not notice him at first. She was too focused on calming the boy, humming a Visayan lullaby that her mother once sang to her during storms. The representative later admitted that it was that moment, the gentleness, the instinctive compassion, the way Maria seemed to carry calm in the midst of chaos, that caught him off guard. He said he had traveled to several countries searching for potential nannies, but he had never witnessed such natural empathy. He asked her questions, not about her credentials, but about her childhood, her family, her dreams. And for the first time, instead of shrinking under scrutiny, she felt her heart expand. A month later, the email arrived. She was shortlisted by the British royal household. Maria stared at the screen, unable to breathe. She thought surely there must be a mistake. She was a simple woman from a coastal province, someone who patched roofs during typhoons and learned English through borrowed textbooks. How could she, of all people, be considered for a role so far beyond anything she had imagined? But hope has a way of appearing exactly when a soul is ready to receive it. She was flown to London for the final evaluation. And the moment she stepped out of Heathrow Airport, the UK felt colder, larger, and more intimidating than any place she had ever seen. Yet she carried with her something no institution, no pedigree, no elite academy had ever possessed: the unshakable compassion of a Filipino heart. In the weeks that followed, she met families, underwent interviews, demonstrated her caregiving skills, and faced questions designed to test her patience, resilience, and judgment. What she did not know, what no one told her, was that her application had already made its way through the inner halls of Buckingham Palace, and that someone within the royal family had insisted, "Find this woman. Bring her in. I want to meet her myself." Her life, once marked by shadows of struggle, was now inching toward a destiny no one in her hometown would ever believe. And she, who once doubted her worth, was beginning to sense that perhaps her journey was never a mistake. Perhaps every hardship had been preparing her for this very moment. There is a certain silence that wraps itself around old British stone, a silence that feels ancient, almost sacred. Maria felt it the very first time she stepped through the narrow entrance of the staff courtyard behind Buckingham Palace. The cold pressed against her cheeks, but her hands were warm. She kept them clasped together, whispering a prayer her mother taught her when she was young. Not for success. She did not dare dream that boldly, but simply for courage. Courage to walk forward. Courage to accept whatever was meant for her. A palace attendant led her down a long hallway decorated with portraits of queens and kings whose stories had shaped centuries. Maria kept her eyes lowered, but she felt the weight of history. The echo of footsteps belonging to people she had only ever known through textbooks borrowed from her local library. And then, unexpectedly, she felt another sensation. Something she did not expect from such an intimidating place. She felt peace. A quiet, anchored peace, as if the halls themselves recognized her presence and welcomed her with a gentle nod. She was escorted into a private sitting room for the final interview. A fire crackled softly in the corner, warming a space that felt too regal, too delicate for someone who once swept floors at dawn just to afford rice. When the royal family member entered, whose identity we respect by keeping private, Maria stood so quickly that she nearly stumbled. She apologized, cheeks flushed, but the royal only smiled. Not the polite kind offered at formal events, but the kind of smile that softens a room. They spoke for nearly an hour. The conversation drifted from childcare philosophies to the unexpected details of life: storms that hit her province, the Filipino belief that joy must be shared even in suffering, the lullaby she sang when comforting frightened children. At one point, the royal paused and said something Maria would carry with her forever. "You speak of hardship," the royal said, "but you speak of it as if it taught you love, not bitterness." The words pierced something deep within her. She lowered her gaze to hide the tears forming at the edges. As days passed, she underwent training inside the palace, learning protocols older than her country. Yet even in the rigidity of ancient customs, she found moments of warmth. She prayed before bed. placing a small rosary under her pillow. She hummed Visayan hymns while folding linens in her assigned quarters. She greeted every guard, cook, and housekeeper with a smile, and slowly, without intending to, she became the quiet heartbeat of the staff wing. There was one moment, simple yet profound, that truly marked her transformation. A young royal child burst into tears during a rehearsal, overwhelmed by cameras and expectations. While others hesitated, Maria stepped forward instinctively. She knelt, wiping the child's tears with the edge of her sleeve, whispering the same words her mother whispered during typhoons. "You're safe. I am here." The room fell silent. Not because of protocol, but because everyone sensed something sacred unfolding, an unspoken bond forming between a royal child and a Filipino woman whose love came from a lifetime of carrying others through storms. Later, a palace official confessed in a hushed tone that they had never seen such natural connection, such unforced tenderness. And in that instant, Maria felt her life shift. She was no longer the woman chasing countries that closed their doors. She was part of something that made her feel not small, not out of place, but chosen. The palace, with all its grandeur, had not changed her. It had simply revealed who she had always been. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. Not through ceremony, nor through any formal announcement, but through the quiet ways lives shift when they overlap with grace. Maria found herself moving through the palace not as an outsider navigating foreign walls, but as a presence people began to depend on. The young royal child she comforted began seeking her out instinctively, slipping her small hand into Maria's whenever uncertainty crept in. Other staff members, who once kept to themselves, now paused to share stories, laughter, small pieces of their day. Even the senior advisors, known for their formality, found themselves softened by her calm presence. She had not expected to belong in a place like this, yet life has a way of placing people exactly where they are meant to heal, and sometimes where they are meant to help others heal as well. Then came the morning when Lady Aurelia Harrington, the same advisor who once froze mid-briefing with Maria's letter trembling in her hands, requested to see her privately. Maria walked into the room unsure, anxious, hands clasped gently before her, but the advisor greeted her not with protocol, but with warmth. She handed Maria a document, her voice steady, yet tinged with something tender. "The family has made their decision," she said. "They would like you to stay, not temporarily, not as a trial. They want you to become the child's permanent nanny." The world seemed to still around her. Maria felt her breath catch as if she were standing again in the storm-ravaged fields of her childhood, but this time with sunlight cutting through the clouds. She blinked rapidly, her vision blurring as tears gathered. She wanted to speak, to thank them, but her voice refused to rise. And in that silence, she remembered every moment that had brought her here. Her father's quiet resilience, her mother's unwavering faith, the nights she walked home through dimly lit streets believing the world had forgotten her. Yet here she was, chosen by a family who could have selected anyone, anywhere from the world's most prestigious institutions. But they chose her because they saw what all Filipinos carry within them: compassion without limits, resilience that refuses to break, and a love that asks for nothing in return but finds its way into every corner of a room. In the days that followed, palace officials whispered among themselves about the extraordinary shift in the child's demeanor. The young royal laughed more, slept better, clung less to fear. And whenever someone asked what had changed, the answer always returned to one thing: a calm, soft-spoken Filipina whose presence made the world feel safer. Maria did not view her role as historic or symbolic or as a break in royal protocol. To her, it was simply an extension of what she had always done: to love with all she had, even when she had little left for herself. But to the royal family, and eventually to the world, she became something far more than a caregiver. She became a quiet reminder that greatness is not built on pedigree, but on character, not on where you come from, but on the heart you bring. And as her story spread, it carried a message that echoed far beyond the palace walls. It reached Filipino homes across continents, letting them hold their heads a little higher. It reached foreigners who suddenly saw the Philippines not as a footnote to global narratives, but as a source of extraordinary humanity. And it reached people who had once underestimated kindness, teaching them that compassion is a kind of strength that can alter the course of lives, even royal ones. In a world too often hardened by conflict and ambition, the Philippines stands as living proof that compassion still exists, that resilience can be gentle, and that hope can arrive wrapped in the hands of someone who has weathered countless storms and still chooses to love. And so, the British royal family broke centuries of tradition, not because of politics, not because of image, but because one Filipina reminded them of something the world forgets too easily. The greatest power is the heart that lifts others. The greatest nobility is kindness, and sometimes the greatest heroes come from the humblest shores.